thank you to the Tecumseh West Gwillimbury Historical Society for inviting us. This is really feels like coming back home. Are we on?
Yes.
You can hear me? Yeah, growing up in this community, this hall is very familiar to us. We performed concerts on this stage, and my grandfather was involved in the Orange Lodge, and he always talked about that little room at the back where the goat stayed. Don't ask me what that means, but I'm here with my younger brother, Marvin Chantler, and
I'm going to ask people if you're okay if I sit down. I have got, I think, a fracture in my hip. I have a meeting with the Sunnybrook a week today, so I'm going to sit down front. So the back of my head looks much better than the front does. Please excuse me. My older sister's much better looking.
So Fran, could you move over your block
yeah,
screen,
of
please?
course I am.
Okay, it's over there.
Probably just move the chair around so it's facing.
Marv, do you want to sit facing? Or no, he wants to see the screen.
I'm going to sit
He wants to look at the screen.
My sister takes off.
Okay.
Do you see? Here.
Okay, so there we go.
Okay, here we are, 1793. Sarah and Moses came to New Robinson from England. Imagine, in 1793. What a trek that was.
You can't see.
And they had, as you can see on the screen, 11 children total. Their first son, Robert, died in infancy, and 2 of the children were born in Canada. And they were Quakers. Anyone familiar with the Quakers? Okay, great. We'll hear more about that later. And Moses and his brother Nathaniel and Joseph, with their families, immigrated to Toronto in 1832 on board the SS Brunswick. Moses and Sarah, as we all know, when you look around in this local cemetery, there were lots of children that died at a very young age. And it was cholera, diphtheria, whooping cough, and so on. And Moses' and Sarah's daughter actually died en route from England to here. Okay. Marv, that's you.
Nope.
No? Okay. William Nathaniel Chantler was the oldest child of Moses and Sarah, who migrated here. In 1832, the family migrated, as we said, to Canada, and William was a clothier in England, and he stayed behind to work in Surrey County in England. And then, when he migrated, he was engaged to Margaret Brooker, who you'll see later. There's this tombstone in the cemetery next door where Margaret Brooker and her husband are buried. They came to Canada, and she refused to. Well, he came first, and she refused to come. Smart lady. She refused to come. And no, William, you go first and get us a home, and then I will come and marry thee. So there you go. And I believe when they first came to this area, they slept under a tree on the 9th line of Tecumseh. And there was a cemetery. There's a cemetery there that Marv and my dad used to look after. And I think the municipality have now taken that over. He was running a mill in Newmarket, and he had, can imagine, $100 William Nathaniel, and he established a store in the corner of the mill that was already in operation. When he first moved here, he moved to, as the map shows, to where Hiram Bigelow had built a mill, which was about a 1 1/4 mile west of the present hamlet of Newton Robinson, near the branch of the Nottawasaga River, which crosses the concession of Tecumseh Township. On the north side of the road, there was a mill pond, and was fed by a stream on the south branch. I don't know much about those days, other than what we have on the screen, because only from what we've heard from our grandfather and so on. Margaret Brooker came in 1839, and William, can you imagine going from here to New York to pick her up when she came? And they hired a rig, hired a horse rig to bring them back here. Can you imagine how much that would have cost then? Probably not a lot, but not everybody hired rigs in those days. And there's the old store, the old Chantler store. And William Nathaniel purchased that store 1 month after his third child was born. Actually, I guess he purchased the property and built the store where it still stands today. It's amazing, it's still standing. I don't remember that veranda, and I don't remember the fence out front, but I certainly remember the house and the store, and there was one tiny little building that I still remember on the side of the store. Mark, do you want to talk more about the store?
I'll go later.
Okay. So, as we said earlier, the Chantlers were Quakers, and they attended a meeting house in Duncarron. Well, the meeting house is now long gone, and the Quakers were buried in that cemetery as late as 1914. The meeting house is gone, as I said, but the cemetery still remains. It's at the northwest corner of Highway 27 and the third concession of Tecumseh Township. It's a small field removed from the corner. As recalled by Mrs. Leeson, Mrs. Leeson used to live past the Coburn's house at the top of the hill, the first farm to the north. And I guess before she was married, the family lived in Bon Head, and she went to the Anglican church in Bon Head, but she would meet the Chantlers driving south to the meeting house. And they were all good friends, but they were not allowed to speak to each other on their way to church. It was just forbidden, absolutely forbidden, because of their Quaker faith. The service would commence, and when they left for home, they were obeying what they believed, what was written in the Bible in Luke 10, chapter 4. Salute no man on the way. It was a different story to drive home. They all became friends, and the world was good, and they all chatted. I think the Chantlers like to chant it, to chat. Based on the name of the sign on the top of the store, which is familiar with many pictures around, and we've all seen it, was taken in 1904 and 1908 when Winifred J. Chantler was the owner of the store. And there's the list of the owners of the store. Can you imagine? It went on for 83 years. 83 years. And William Russell Chantler married Emma Lucinda Law, and they were our great-grandparents. Joseph Hipwell took over the business started by his father-in-law, William Nathaniel, in 1816. And he remained there, 1866, and he remained there until 1874. Then established a store in Bond Head, which he and his descendants managed for over 80 years. I don't know why he moved to Bond Head, but he did. William Chantler's son, George Chantler, assumed control of the store in Newton Robinson, continuing the business there in 1893, when James' son, Milton, who you saw earlier in the list of owners, took over the store. Apparently the Milton Chantler had done a great trade there from around 1904, 1905, but he moved to Brampton, and his brother Winifred became the manager. So I don't know why, again, maybe a bigger city or town or whatever. Later Winifred went west to Moose Jaw, and his eldest, and the eldest of William Nathaniel's sons, Joseph, with his son Marshall, took over the store on January 1st, 1908. I certainly remember my grandfather talking about Marshall Chantler very, very well, very much about Marshall. The Newton Robinson store, as I knew it, of course, was later years. It had many owners after the Chantlers. There was the Elstons, who, when Mom and Dad would go out of town, I would go, I don't think Marv was in school yet, would go after school, and they would let me help serve people in the store. And upstairs there was a pool room. And of course women weren't allowed in a pool room, or girls for any sense of the reason. But he had a ham radio up there, and he would take us up to listen to the ham radio. And to me that was a really big deal. A really big deal to be able to hear people talking in different countries and such. It was just amazing. Her name was Lee and his name was Jack. And I felt so attached to them because they were in the Chantler store that when our first daughter, Sandra, was born, we called her Sandra Lee, after the Elstons who were in the Chantler store. And so the Chantler name was connected, as we said, under the management for 83 years. Can you imagine? 83 years. In 1860, Eliza was married to Joseph Hipwell. He had just sold his business and was looking for a new chance to open something. William, well, Joseph, what art thou going to do now? You sold your store, what are you going to do? And Joseph said, well, William, and that's how they spoke in those days. I don't know yet. I don't know. William, thou hast to buy me out. Joseph, I have not thought about that, William. William, I think it over and talk it over with thy wife. Thy wife. The next day, Joseph announced to his father-in-law that he had decided it was a good idea that they would buy the store in Newton Robinson. So they did. But they had to, Joseph said, they will go to the lawyer and draw up papers. Well, William wasn't having any part of that. We will not go to a lawyer. Thy wife knows, and my wife knows, and I know, and thou knowest. I will not go to a lawyer. And that again was the old Quaker faith. Their word was their word. And I remember that extending to my father in some way He was a farmer and had a great herd of Holstein cattle and a milk quota that the milk had to be on the milk stand at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he had Americans that would come up and buy his cattle sight unseen. He would show them all the pedigrees. I remember, Mr. Alstein was his name. And I remember that. And he would show them the pedigrees. And again, they trusted our father so much that they said, if you say what they are, we don't need to see them. So that really got passed down from generation to generation. And I really think I had an experience where somebody wanted me to write something to say I wasn't going to be in a position later on. And I had already said, I am not going to take that position. Well, we want it in writing. I said, no, my word is my word, and I'm not putting it in writing. That's just how we operate. Okay, Marv, your turn.
I think the position she was talking about might have been for the mayor of Huntsville. She had lunch with the old boys and they said, okay, Fran, it's your turn. And they told her what she would have to do for them to get their support to be mayor. And she said, I'm not taking the job. Well, you'll have to write that. And that's what Fran was referring to, that she wasn't going to write anything down. So, excuse me, besides this hip, I've got a throat that's not very good. When William sold the store in 1866, he bought this land and built the house for him and his wife. Now, we were a little late coming tonight, Mark, because some truck trailer on County Road 1 was in the ditch, so we had to turn around and go backwards and come back up the town line, actually the Tecumseh town line, and then come down the 7th, so, or sorry, the 10th. So we saw all the old Chantler residences on the way.
That was great.
The one thing that I don't understand here, and maybe somebody can help me, or it'll be at a question period, how many acres were involved with this property? Anybody know?
I think in the initial sale, I think it was around 50 acres.
Was there?
I think so.
And the Galini farm was to the west?
Oh, that I'm not sure.
Well, the only reason I know is I worked for Alan Houghton, God bless his soul, and he paid me $1 a day, and I was, in later days, we kidded about that. I was going to sue him for on practice, yeah. Anyway, I would get Alan's cows from the Galini farm, which was just to the west of this. This house was totally derelict. The doors were missing. This is in my time, when maybe I was, I don't know, 10 years old. And Margaret Cowan, Dr. Margaret Cowan bought it and came up. She was a orthodontist and spent a pile of money and built that beautiful house, which I guess was beautiful before, but it certainly had became derelict at some point in time. Rusey, he doesn't like to be called Russell. Is Russell here by any chance? No. Thank goodness, he knows more about Chantler than I do. Anyway, he loves history, and he and his sister Robin lived there with Mom and Dad. And then when Mrs. Cowan got older, they sold the farm, and I believe it was bought by a Baptist minister who I don't know still owns it today.
Right now?
Oh, Grandma.
Yeah, is Fran still own it?
Yes,
They were going to come, I don't see them.
Yeah, it's still-
Okay.
The blacks were in between.
Yeah,
Blacks.
the blacks.
Yeah, Kathy and John Black and the kids, God bless Kathy. Kathy and I worked tirelessly to start Matthew's house back in 2005, 2006. Their first child they adopted, and of course once they adopted they had two boys of their own. And the boys I talked to John not too long ago, both of them are, Alex unfortunately had a very serious car accident in Montreal years ago and will never be able to work again. But Kathy made a deal with the insurance company that he would always have someone to look after him. And he's been out west with his brother, but they're moving home. So John's gonna have Kira and the whole family home, Michael and Alex home with him very soon. So Alfred Houghton, I'm sorry, I don't know, but I think it says who he is here. He bought the property, and obviously Alan was renting or owning something around there when I was moving cattle for milking purposes. And this is good luck, guys. If you know any of them, I don't. So Mark, I think you put this here, so you got to help me here, buddy.
Well, I think that William and Margaret are the two old ones in the middle.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Well-
it's Aunt Mabel, second from the,
Sorry?
and Aunt Mabel Chantler, I think, second from the,
Okay.
right.
Well, I'll show her in a bathing suit. She looks better in a bathing suit. I'm not going to go through because you guys know it's fine. You can just wing them. There's lots of Chantler gravestones out there. You probably know them better than I do. So I think you've done this anyway. We'll just start to go down. So what I know here starts with number 6. William Russell married Emma Lucinda Law, and William was my great-grandfather. So Frederick Dufferine Chantler married Lydia Leonard. I'm sorry I can't help you. Norman Chantler married Fanny Nixon. Norman was my grandfather, and I remember my grandfather. He actually, besides I didn't tell the story, I think I kissed my first girl behind the curtains on the stage here. I'm not telling you who it was. But my grandfather, Norm, was very well known for reading poetry and stories right here on the stage. Christmas time, any special time, he was quite a notorious entertainer. Had a good sense of humor. And Fanny Nixon, I never knew Fanny. She died before I was born. DeWitt was my dad, and he married Mary Noble, who was my mother, obviously. Had two kids, Frances, my older sister, and myself. When I say that to everybody, they say, yeah, but she's better looking than you are. So. Then Mabel Chantler married Charles Clark. Charlie was from out west. I'm going to say it was from Adnak, Saskatchewan. And if you want to know where they got the name for Adnak, it's Canada spelled backwards. And anyway, Irene Law married Charles Clark first, and she died. And Gladys Gertrude was Mabel's sister. Clarence Gordon Chantler was killed in the war, of which the picture is right there. And Vivian Constant Chantler died within the first year. Again, does anybody, can you help me there?
No, I don't recall them talking about Vivian at all. I certainly remember Grandpa talking about Clarence.
Yeah.
He was very upset with Clarence. He was his younger brother, and the fact that he went off to war and was killed and never came back. Grandpa told me that story many, many times. It really, really bothered him that.
Very young too. I
Very
think he was
young.
killed at 18.
20.
20 when he died. I think he went at 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most of those days, back in those days, they lied about their age. You didn't, right? Yeah. So here's William Russell Chantler and Gladys in the front row. Emma Lucinda, wife, DeWitt Roy, grandson. Back row, Fred, Mabel, daughter, Irene, daughter, and Norman Russell, son. So I think I would say my father and his grandfather were, and even grandfather, was quite a resemblance of all of them, yeah, very much so. This is a poor picture, but that is my grandfather, Norman. And is that Gladys?
That's Gladys, yeah.
That's
Aunt
Gladys, and my dad and my mom. And obviously that's me with Cat or somebody. As I said, it's not the greatest picture, sorry about that. This classroom is D. Chantler, taken, that can't be right.
That's two.
No?
Well,
That's,
he died in 1989.
he died in 1989 at 90. Is that math doesn't work? I don't think, does it? I don't.
Sure
I'm not
looks
arguing.
like him though.
I'm not arguing that's not him, but up
Oh,
top,
so maybe the date's wrong, yeah.
yeah, I think there's something
Okay.
wrong with the date. That's him, and I don't recognize the school either,
The
because it's,
school, I think the school was the Newtown School,
The old,
the original one.
oh, the original one, yeah, okay, yeah, I would agree.
Well,
There's a picture
the
downstairs.
second one, right? The first one was log, wasn't it?
Yeah, possibly.
And the second
Yeah.
one was wood, right?
There's a picture of it downstairs.
There's a picture coming up here too, yeah, there is, yeah.
Where the one is now.
So there's William Russell and Emma Lucinda, but he's a spit image of my grandfather, Norman, spit image.
Yeah, that's what's downstairs.
That's the old school there that I don't recognize. I certainly recognize the new one because we'll change pictures and we'll talk about it then.
Yeah.
This is Clarence. Clarence, yeah, he was killed in action.
he was in France.
Now this is what I'm calling bathing suits. This on the right hand side is my Aunt Mabel, and next to her is Gladys from right going left. I don't know the other three ladies, but they were pretty. Those were bathing suits a long time ago.
Walton.
Yeah. Aunt Mabel had a great sense of humor,
She was a seamstress.
and then there was Gladys. My mother says you can't say anything nice, shut your mouth. So here we go, from left to right, Hilda and Hilt, they're very good friends. They were only friends, right, Fran?
No, they were, Bill Nixon was Fanny's brother.
Oh, okay.
And Hilt died very young. And Aunt Hilda, remember she used to come to the farm?
Yeah, I do.
Especially
Yeah, I
at
do.
Easter time when she'd bring us, she came from the city and she brought us the Laura Secord chocolates.
Yeah, those
And that
are,
was a big deal.
sure was. So that's obviously on the right,
And
Norman, yeah.
my grandmother, my grandmother had cancer. She died at 62. And Mom went into the hospital to have me. They had a nurse at the farmhouse. Tensie Hayes was the nurse. Remember Tensie from wherever?
Yeah.
And so I never knew my grandmother. But in those days, they stayed in hospital for many, many days after the child was born. But she got up early to come home because she had to go to her mother-in-law's funeral. And I remember being told, I never knew, but I remember being told that when one person dies, another one is born. And I was called after her, because she was also Frances. So for a lot of years after, people would say to me, the older people, they're gone now, would say, so you're the one that replaced Fanny. And I always felt I had a big shoes to fill.
Anyway, it's really funny, Scott Rose sitting behind me, and Scott, I think your grandfather started it, but everybody, my real name is Marvin. I call myself Marv and everybody else calls me Marv. But your grandfather always called me Norman, which I got because you skip a generation, right? You don't know how many people that don't know me from Adam, for some reason, call me Norman. I have no idea why, but I'll blame your grandfather for starting it, Scott. So Dee and Mary got married. Mary, my mom, was She was a very fortunate lady. Why? She was the only daughter of the family. She had 4 brothers, and they were different. They were wild. They were bankers. They were Canada steamship captains. Anyway, Mom got lucky because one day Uncle Fred, I'm not sure, what did Fred, he worked for Godrich, Sifto Salt and Godrich, but he liked to make money. Fred liked to make money and they'd take second, third, fourth mortgages, he didn't care. But anyway, Fred was cleaning a gun in the kitchen up on the, I think it's the 9th line of Innisfil, but the gun was not supposed to be loaded. It discharged and just missed my mother, so yeah. Yeah. So anyway, Mom's dress was a light pink violet. She kept it in her seated trunk for many years. This is Fran. I wouldn't try it on, but Fran would try it on. So.
When I was young, I loved to try it on. It was so different. It was island. It had little tiny holes in it.
Do you know what I learned today? Today is Victoria Day. It was Queen Victoria that started wedding dresses being white. Anybody hear that today?
You know much Victoria language.
And also, it was her husband that started Christmas trees, decorating Christmas trees.
Yeah.
That's what you get when you listen to the tractor when you're cutting grass for 10 hours. This is my sister Frances Ann, Franny, obviously crying on the porch of our house on the 10th line next to the Holberts. And there's the good-looking Marvin.
With his teeth in.
And there's lady, I think I called her Lassie, but that was the picket fence at home on the farm on the 10th east of Newton Robinson, yeah. My father was a great showman. Whatever he had to have the best. He and my grandfather, I've got trophies dating back to the early 1930s in my office in the barn, where at the Royal Winter Fair, they showed Scotch Collies, they showed Holstein cattle, they showed Yorkshire pigs, Suffolk sheep, geese. And my dad actually, Harry Cross from Beaton, who was the trainer of 3 NHL players, Wayne Carlton, Johnny Gould, and Jimmy Rutherford, always would get my dad to, he was in charge of the Beaton Fair for many years, always get my dad to judge the geese at the Beaton Fair. Okay. So that's, I know exactly when that is. That's 1953. It would have been my Cubs. I never was a Boy Scout for very long. I was a Cub. I obviously probably won that at the Beaton Fair or the Canadian National Exhibition or something. That's the old shed excuse me, at the back of our house. My dad that year, I think got paid, I can't remember whether it was $20, $50, or $200, but it wasn't very much because they were closing all the roads going east because 400 highway was coming through. And he didn't get much because he didn't really have to go out of his way very far. But somebody like the Nobles on the other side to come to Newton Robinson would have to go a long way out of their way because they were right on Highway 400. I don't know how much money they got, but that was the start of, did the Wests are over here, did you ever hear your dad and mom got paid for?
I don't remember that, but I remember you used to cross 400 highway to go to the other side.
Yeah.
My brother got the high school bus on the 11th line at the bottom of the overpass.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that was 53, and we can turn this apart, yeah. There we are, ready for church. That's the farm, that's the balcony where my sister was there. And lots of good memories on the farm, yeah. Lots of good memories.
Particularly.
Where was the farm? Which one is that?
It's, when you go down, I'll go by memory from before. Mr. Rowe, then his son Bill, Then we had Hulbert's, Gordon Hulbert, who moved across the road here. Then we had Grenville Hulbert, and then my dad. And then next was Alan Horner's at the West Zone now. We used to walk uphill to school a mile and a half, uphill both ways, yeah. Although we got lucky because back in the days, I mean, snow, talk about snow, they needed a bulldozer to open the road. My parents would say, now stay off those big drifts because you could touch the hydro lines. Mr. Rowe couldn't get his track opened in time, so the road was open, so he would hook up for the horses to get exercise. He'd hook the horse up to a sleigh, and we would thumb a ride to school with him, yeah, it was good. This is Mom and Dad with the tree next to you guys, I guess, Andrea?
Yep.
Is that tree, yeah? He planted that tree, it sure grew quickly.
Yes.
They built the house there were 3 houses built, Frank Houghton's house, my mom and dad's house, and Ira Wilson in Cookstown, who had the feed mill, and were all built by a gentleman called Ken Bowman from Alliston. And my dad, I think they sold their farm for $28,000, and they spent $18,000 building this house here. And this was on a big lot that my dad purchased the lot from your grandfather Scott for, he got had on the purchase price. It was $500, can you believe it? $500, what would it be now? $1 million, $750,000, yeah. This was Blackburn's cabin in Huntsville. They took, excuse me, obviously my dad and mom must have been, and myself and my grandfather must have taken a holiday, which they didn't take much. I don't know why he was there, because the man milked cows 7 days a week. He must have had somebody sitting in for him for a day. He worked himself to death.
We went to Algonquin Park. I was there too. I took the picture. I was there also and took the picture. And we went to Algonquin Park and fed deer out of the car window because they wouldn't let us get out in case we got hit or they attacked us or something. But I remember it was a big deal to go on a holiday.
So this is the school that I remember. When we moved to town, I was 8, I think I was 9 years old when we moved into Newton Robinson from the farm. And I got a job as the custodian of the school. We had 2 washrooms downstairs, boys and girls. They were pail a day, so I'd have to carry a pail a day down to the toilet. And I had to sweep the floors and do whatever. Herman Harvey was my boss. Herman was from Blondhead. He was in charge of all the schools in West Gwillimbury. I went to school here until grade 6. Then they trucked us to Fisher's Corners for grade 7. And then we were the first year of class in grade 8 at Osler on Highway 88, which is still there. It hasn't changed very much. But I'm not going to read all the names of it, but there's a couple that there's no name there, and I can't help because I don't know who they are, but Franny's there and so on. So. Marv, help me here, will you? Where did this come? I know where it says here, Betty Josephine, in memory of Ernest Baycroft Chantler. Is this somewhere? I've never seen it before.
Yeah, it is somewhere. There was a book in the church that described her process of making this.
Oh, okay.
And I believe someone has it that lives down in Toronto. I think someone in the Historical Society tried to get to contact that person, have it on display here, but
Can you point to some of those locations and what they are? Because until people realize that's the 27.
What I can't tell you, Andrea, is I can't tell you the very first house to the south.
This one. This one right
Obviously,
here.
yeah, that one.
That's on the 9th line,
Oh, the 9th, okay.
and it was, Chantlers were living in there, so,
Oh, okay,
but it's on the 9th, yeah.
okay. I didn't realize that the scale wasn't quite,
Yeah, so
okay.
are you familiar with that house?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, because I don't know it.
I never knew that.
I didn't know. But starting up top, obviously you got the store, and then up over here you start with the church.
There's the church.
Church, the hall,
This here is Anne's house right here.
yes, yeah, because it's showing in another slide, flipped,
And there is the hall.
The
And the
hall.
hall we're in right now.
yep. And,
That's the Farmer's Inn, on the corner. With the tent.
the McDonald's,
McDonald's.
No, McDonald's would be.
that was a roll.
That's McDonald's.
That's McDonald's. That's the school.
That would be the
Yeah, that's the
school.
school, that's the school right there. Sorry.
Okay, okay.
That's the school.
Yeah, the McDonald's was, Scott, your uncle, your great uncle, right?
That's right.
Russell
Russell.
and Edith, both?
Yeah.
I used to cut Edith's grass. Yeah, Russell passed fairly young in life, I think. And there's a big yard, right? The yard is still owned by, I don't know who owns, the McDonald's have sold.
Yes, they have. So
Yeah.
James Rutherford and Becky
Evans.
Evans.
Okay, okay.
Robin Evans.
I mean, it's beautiful. And Ann Berman and I were talking, and the other one, there isn't a picture of Sam Reed's house, but I'm sure that's Sam Reed's house and Vernon's house beside Ann's. That's Sam's, I
Right
think.
here.
That's
That's
very.
No, right here, I
Vernon's.
think that's
Yeah,
the
that's-
small one, yeah.
That's Sam, yeah.
Sam's, yeah, and that was Vern Collins'
Yeah,
house right here.
yeah. And Sam Reed worked for Mr. Rowe forever. And I can tell you, he got us in trouble because we called him our bootlegger. When we were too young to buy beer, one night there was four, it was the night that Marilyn Monroe died. There were four of us, two Coburns, a Watson, and myself. And we went to the drive-in theater in Sharon, and we had a 12-pack of beer that we bought from Sam, and we only had one bottle apiece, I think. So we were driving around. I was going to stay with my grandmother in the foyer, and we obviously should have went there and not trucking around. The police stopped us, got there was an open case of beer, which is big trouble back in those days. Of course, it's written up in the local paper. Well, did I get it? Did I get it? Yeah. And one of the Coburns took the rap because he didn't want the Watson boy who was driving to take it. So, yep.
So this is just showing you where Elizabeth, who made that
Oh, okay,
needle
okay,
point,
Oh,
he did it in honor of her dad, Ernest
Okay.
Baycroft Chantler.
Okay.
That's it. I'm just showing you where
yeah.
she is in the big picture.
And we're not familiar with the Rourkes. I know the gravestones are here, but
Yeah.
it just doesn't ring a bell with me. And then, of course, it's funny because Ann's got it on her phone, but she just showed me tonight. My dad, this house in modern day times was owned by Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen was the editor of the Toronto Globe and Mail for years. And he was getting older and he wanted to move, and my dad thought that it would be a good buy. My father purchased it. So Ann said, oh, well, that would be David was doing something in the inside washroom,
Right.
and they sanded it off, and it was ordered by Mr. Chantler. Well, I said, that wasn't my dad, that would have been James. He bought the house twice, bought it second time in 1907, sold it 2 months later to his sister, and then she owned it for 30 years. Yeah. And then my dad bought it from Mr. Allen, and then, how long have you been in town now, Ann?
44 years.
Wow. I've been on the farm 44 years this year, yeah. So there's Ann's house, yep, 1882. And I remember, I don't know whether it was Ann or her late husband, Dave, came to a sale that we were having, raising money for the church, was it?
Oh, good for the church.
Yeah, and we had barber's chairs. And they bought one on the condition that we'd carry it upstairs. That was a tough carry. And Ann said it was there until 2 years ago.
Yes.
How'd you get it down?
She needed
The
more.
fellow who bought it knew a lot about them, and he was able to take it apart, and he drained the hydraulic fluid, because everything still worked. It went up and down,
Yeah.
and tilted and twirled, it did
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Anyway, he knew what he was doing, and he took it apart, and, yeah.
There's a lot of similarity to this house. A lot of similarity when you look at it quickly to the old McDonald house or the Roll house. Okay, we got more gravestones. Okay, so here I can do most of them. We'll start, this is Mr. Breeden's house on the
Oh, this one
left.
here, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Mr. Breeden had the blacksmith shop there. We did our skate sharpened and he'd fix anything. Gordon was a good guy. Next to the church. Then we got the hall. Then we got the store. The green in the store. Up above we got the Coleman's. Right, we've got school, mom and dad's house. This is the row house. That I think is Frank Houghton's house. And the next house, I'm guessing, was that Ralph? Was it next door to Frank?
Yeah.
So Ralph,
That's right.
and then I think the bottom one was an old Whiteside house. It definitely was a Whiteside house. The other one, you got me stumped. I don't know who they are.
Oh, you don't know these?
No, I don't know. Up top is Vernon's house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the one that got you the alcohol. That's his house.
Is it his house?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, from a different angle.
Different angle, and it's been re-sided.
Oh, okay, okay. Sam Reed, yeah. Sam
Sam
worked
Reed.
for Mr. Rowe for years and years and years.
That's Sam Reed, that's
Yeah.
Surrey.
Oh.
Surrey lives here.
Yeah.
And this is the house.
Is that Gwen Taylor's?
What's that?
I think you're right.
Is it Gwen?
Yeah, that's what that is, yeah, it's Gwen Taylor's house.
Oh,
This one right
okay.
here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you're right.
Oh, she's that next one down the hill, yeah. Yeah,
That's the next
Yeah.
house down the hill.
yeah, okay, thank you.
So there's Ann's house.
Yeah.
And then
Oh, or what was Culver's?
that's the Halbert.
That's
Yeah.
the Halbert. Yeah,
And then Sumter, and then,
Steamboat's house.
Steamboat's,
that's
yeah.
right. There we go, you passed the test.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
must have lived here.
Once upon a time. That's the Rowe McDonald house, yeah.
That used to be an inn at one point.
Yes, I think it was, I called it a hotel, but,
Hotel,
and
yeah.
then, yeah. New Robinson was a booming place, right?
It was.
And here's the guy that I worked for $1 a day. I didn't work for Alfred. I worked for Alan, who I'm thinking was Frank's father. And that was the auction sale
Yeah.
that Alan had when he moved into town. Yeah.
And that's where he moved.
And I babysat for her. I
And Mrs.
babysat
Schluter is
for
here.
Alan and May.
Yes, that was Mary Ann. Mary Ann's here.
Now, tell me, it says the Pulfords lived.
In this
Here.
house, yeah.
Is that fact? I thought the Pulfords lived across the road.
In the Whiteside house.
They moved from, my dad and Joe Pulford were probably best friends. They were very, very close. Joe, they were born, raised, and their boys, Bob and Clark, in Thistletown, Western Road North, Thistletown. Clark was a school teacher, and he was great in teaching the kids gym, but in those days it would be soccer, hockey, baseball, you name it. He was teaching, and of course Bob went on to be the Maple Leafs. The reason I don't think that, I'm thinking he was either Russell Copeland, and then there was the Whitesides on the other side. Bob Pulford would be my third cousin, and he babysat me when they went to the Whiteside funeral. And I would have been age that I needed to be babysat, which probably would have been pretty darn young because you grew up faster in those days than you do today.
Right.
But I always thought that the Pulfords lived. They actually came from, he was in the grain business. He would buy grain from farmers and sell it. He'd truck it and sell it. And I thought he also lived up around the Fort Guilford area before or after he came here. I don't know. But Joe was a great, I can tell the story, Joe and Lil. Joe came to the church here a couple of times. We had to call 911, get the ambulance in because Joe would faint. And he'd go to the hospital and he'd be fine. And his wife Lil had a stroke and she didn't know anybody, anything. Joe lived in the little house he rented the little house by the funeral home in Alliston. Thomas Funeral Home. He was very good friends with the Thomases. They would have lived in the house where the funeral parlors are. And Joe would go and see Lil in Good Sam every day for lunch and dinner, and he'd come back home. And Joe, obviously, when he was fading at the church, obviously had some heart conditions. Joe had a stroke, a heart attack, and they rushed him to Barrie, and they called Clark. Clark came up from Whistledown or whatever it is called now, Vaughan, and got to see his dad before he died, but he died that night. So the next day, Clark came down. Remember, I said Lil didn't know anybody. Joe would go over with her. We didn't think she knew anything, anybody or anything. Clark went over to say, we lost Dad today. She died within 4 hours. And I was at the funeral. They had a dual funeral at Thomas Funeral Home for the two of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder, right?
My mom was our mom was in Simcoe Manor at the time, and Joe would still call Mom and talk to her there. And he said it won't be long. He told her it won't be long before we're both gone. And they died.
Yeah, Joe's a great guy. Had a great sense of humor. And I think Bob Pulford was on the last Leaf team that unfortunately hasn't won the cup since. This is I have this hanging in my house wall, thanks to Peter Ellis. How many did you sell, Peter?
Quite a few, and I
Yeah.
have one still on my house too.
Yeah. Anyway, this is south of the church where the graveyard would be today. And that was, I think that would be the Holbert house. I don't think it's your house, Sam.
No, it is my house.
Is it yours?
Yeah, there's a bit of, artistic license there, but it is my house.
So we're hiding the Holbert. Okay, there it is.
Culbert's house would be.
Culbert's house would be this side here.
No, that's Gordon Breeden.
Yeah,
Oops.
Yeah.
yeah. That's the
That would be
one.
Gordon Breeden's house. That's on
Yeah.
the other side of the road.
Yeah.
That's the Holbert house right there. And this was a livery stable. When you brought your horses to church, you parked them in the livery stable and you went to church.
The stable was across the street from
Yeah,
the
that's
church.
where the cemetery is. Yeah.
That's
That's the
not
cemetery right now.
No,
No, it's not, Marv.
No,
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 it's
this
not.
is south of
Ann's house.
my house.
Stand down at Sergey's
North,
house and look
looking
out, that's the
north.
view.
And there's a barn there now, which is, at Mark and Andrea's barn, but it's only one story, and nobody seems to ever remember it ever being like a tobacco.
If you
barn,
look up
whatever that
Franklin
is.
Carmichael's work, he used to like to paint communities and also these large barns from out west and in the flat provinces. That's the style he liked. So he kind of superimposed his preference for barns.
I always thought he might have dripped a bit of paint there. Gotta make this taller.
Well, I always thought, Peter, that was a livery stable across the street.
There was a livery stable, but it was in the cemetery next to the Hulberts, or well, Denise and,
West.
Yeah.
yeah. That was where the livery stable was.
So the
before-
south cemetery.
Before they made the south cemetery.
Yeah,
Marv, so on the right is the Vernon Connell's house.
Yeah,
That's Vernon Connell's house.
yeah, right there.
Because the
And
church
then-
is right
Exactly.
next to
And
And
then
then
it's
Ann's
my house.
house and then the church
The
across
church.
the street from Ann's.
Yeah.
And there's a smaller barn.
And this is Breeden's, and then next,
Yeah.
we don't see,
We don't see the
Albert
Albert's
house,
house.
it's not painted, we didn't put it in there.
Yeah,
Artist.
artistic
Yeah.
license.
He ran out of things.
okay, well, then I stand, thank you for correcting Jill.
He just like native barns.
So this is the Rourke that I really
Don't know anything about.
know nothing about the Rourkes.
Well, I added this because this book here was published by the Historical Society.
Yeah.
This woman, oops, oh, geez, did I just lose it? Oh, that's back there. So this lady, Phyllis Armstrong, approached us and she edited this, her great-great-grandfather's diary, which was handwritten, and asked us to publish it, so we did. So this Richard Rourke received a location ticket, north half of lots 13 and 14, which are on the 8th concession, but they actually border on the 9th line, right? And it's between side road 10 and side road 15. And
Thank you.
so we published it, and then, wouldn't you know it, his son William married the Chantler's daughter. Yeah, so they're tied. Who knew? Big circle.
One of the, I should say, one of the pictures that was showing earlier, that the Chantler name was ended back in some 1922 or something. That's not factual, because I, Marvin Chantler,
Yes,
owned
that's
the
very
store. And we thought, it was owned by George Carter, George and Rose,
Mary.
Mary, where they had an antique store. She died, and George, he had been president of Cara Foods, and was a well-spoken man, and the business antiques and stuff were going down the drain, and he wanted to move to Toronto. He was trying to get into a home in Toronto, and he started trying to sell the place, the big lot, which came back all the way down behind the church, for started about $450,000. So we had no interest whatsoever. Then I think he came down to 300,000. I happened to meet George at church one day, and George said, I normally don't do business at church on Sundays, but if you know anybody that wants to buy this place, I'd sell it, because I just got my call that my room is ready in Toronto where I want to go, and I'm going, so this place is going. He said, I want to sell it, and I wouldn't take a penny less than, I think, $220,000.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, it sure was. So I said, absolutely nothing. I didn't show my hand. Well, yeah, okay, thanks, George, bye. I
You were
came home.
cagey then too.
Yeah, I was. I came home and I phoned my buddy Gene Fuster, who Gene built everything on my farm, and he's built everything, a lot of places, great builder. So I said, Gene, I think there's a deal to be had here. George's going to sell that place, and it's a pretty nice piece of property, and he's asking $220,000 for it. So let's go over and buy it. So over we go. And the first thing George says, listen, he said, I told you yesterday, I won't take a penny less than $210,000. So he's already gone down $10,000. So we shook his hand. We said, you can stay here until you want to leave. We probably knew that it was polluted. We figured it was, and it was. There was a gentleman by the name of Fred Tripp that owned the store. I don't know whether he was the last one. There were Lennoxes in there. Fran would have babysat the Lennox girls. The doghouse, Scott, that your grandfather moved from right behind here down to his place for his office when he was lieutenant governor. Marv, come on in and we'll have a little drink of scotch, young. Mrs. Rowe didn't approve of Mr. Rowe drinking in the house, so he would have the odd nip of scotch out in the doghouse, which had been moved. Anyway, so we made a deal, and Freddie Tripp, there was I think Stan Coleman down the road was Texaco, and my dad, when he went to go west, had never had a credit card, and he applied for a credit card. They wouldn't give it to him because he had no credit. He never paid ever for everything, you know. So Stan said, listen, if you guys don't give him, he had Texaco, if you don't give him a Texaco credit card, he said, I'm shutting this place down. So he got a Texaco credit card, but it was BA. BA was up here. And Freddie Tripp, in his wisdom, when he closed the store, filled the tanks with water. And the water obviously rusted out and went underneath the north part of the store, so we had to get way under there, and it wasn't that much, but it was where it was located that we had to get a clean bill of health for it, yeah. And we sold it, and, but we gave, Kathy Black was treasurer of the church, and I said, hey Kathy, you have an appraisal here of the property that goes down, it's an L-shaped property, it goes like this, all the way down. And Jill, I think you guys went to a meeting in Bradford. We had to change the zoning from, this is commercial zoning, had to change it from whatever the zoning is for a graveyard,
Yeah.
institutional or something.
Institutional,
And
probably, yeah.
we gave it, I got a tax, Gina and I got a tax receipt from Kathy for $75,000. And the graveyard is now owned by Luke Robinson, the United Church Cemetery.
What year did you sell it, the store?
I have to guess, Patty.
Well,
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Let's see, Grant lived there. Grant's been on my place for, I'm gonna say around 1992, 93, 94, somewhere between 90 and 95, I think. I'm guessing. So now we know who the Rorks are. Thank you.
There you go.
And the end, yeah, I don't think that I've missed anything. But certainly, are there any questions or when I screwed up on, please correct me.
Marv, do you remember when Bing Mayer owned the store? The Mayers?
Bing went to Barry, right?
I think so, yeah.
Bing was a very good friend of Mom and Dad's, and he would come back. I remember him, not when he was here, I remember after he had sold the store. Yeah, he owned the Lake Simcoe Motel in Barrie, I believe. Yeah, nice guy, really nice guy.
Just when Gordon and Jane owned the house here in Newton Robinson.
Your old
Yeah.
lady? Yeah.
Long story short, my dad used to come up here from the city with his mum because Jane was an in-law by marriage.
Okay.
So at that time, Dad used to go to the store, but it was the mayor's store.
Yeah, I did with Grant Mayer. We were trying to think of his last name, but we did come up with it, Grant Mayer, yes.
Yeah,
He would come back and see Mom and Dad quite often, but I never knew.
yeah,
It was before my time.
yeah.
was it a general store at that point?
Yeah, Grandpa Breeden still had the blacksmith shop there, and Dad always said Grandpa would flip him a nickel or something and go buy a pop at the store or something.
Well,
Yeah.
I know a penny would get you 5 black
Well,
balls.
whatever it was, yeah, whatever, yeah.
Diddle was 5 cents.
What-
Kick Cola was 5 cents.
Oh, maybe that's what it was,
And
yeah.
the store, in my day, I mean, it was 400 Highway, I believe, was built right around, oh, we had it there, let me remember backwards, 50, 52, 53,
Before we moved.
yeah, somewhere around there. And Highway 27 up to that was a busy cottage route for people going. And this store was very famous for black diamond cheese. Black diamond cheese, yeah. People would stop there and, yeah. Any other questions?
Marvin, when did you guys, your parents buy the farm on the 10th line, just back of us, and who did you buy it from?
I think my grandfather bought it. My grandfather, you know where the Vanstones are down the 10th? My grandfather came from there. That Fran calls that the Chantler house. I call the Ma's the Chantler house. Too many Chantlers around here. But I don't have a clue. Do you know who we bought it from?
Okay, so it wasn't purchased by your mom and dad?
No.
Okay, it's long before that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I just always knew it as a Chantler
Yeah.
property. And your mom was a noble on the other side of 400?
No relation. My mother was a noble from Innisfil.
Okay,
Yeah, no relation to Clarence and,
Clarence.
yeah, and Jim, your neighbor Jim, yeah. And my former sister-in-law.
Yeah.
Doesn't like me, but she does. She here, Jim?
No, I don't think so.
So I can't tell you who Grandpa bought it from, but Bob Lanthier bought it from my dad. And I was brought up Protestant, but I thought I was becoming Catholic because Bob lived with us in the house. And for a long time, he was only like 21, 22. I called him my older brother. He's 90, 91. He doesn't look a day over 70. He goes to Mexico every year. He is in very good shape. But Bob taught me to water ski, taught me to do everything, as did Scott's grandfather. You know, the Shah of Iran came past our house. We'd go to your cousin Earl, and I would go with Grandpa to hockey games with Russian ambassadors. We would go to horse auctions with the Armstrongs, Elgin Armstrong, not Ted, but Elgin, whether it was in Harrisburg or Lexington, Kentucky. Yeah, but Bob was a great guy, turkey farmer. I learned to drive in Toronto. My first drive in Toronto was with his truck, delivering fresh turkeys to the butcher shops on Yonge Street, Callison's, Healy's, and then the Royal York if you had a turkey that maybe was missing a wing or something. Who knows when you're eating once cooked? You know, they take fresh turkeys. But yeah. Any other questions?
Apparently there was a Chantler General Store in Stroud. Is that the same family, do you know?
That's news to me. I never knew that. I'm going to say no. My mother on the Noble side was up in that area, but I don't think there were any Chantlers. Now there is a Chantler in Barrie who I've spoken to, and there was one in Essa, Ron Chantler, and another one in Barrie, but they were distant cousins.
And Allison. Allison Chantlers.
Alliston Chantlers, yeah,
The Chantlers and Allison.
okay. You can talk about them because I don't know them. Oh, yeah, Keith. Yeah, my grandfather, I think, was a second cousin to Dolt Chantler, and then there would be my dad, and then there would be me on one side, and on Dolt's side there was Keith Chantler and Murray Chantler. So I think I'd be about a 16th cousin to, yeah, not very close, but yeah, Keith in later years with, Murray still works for WD Potatoes, been there for years, he's a mechanic at WD, and Keith in his later days was married to Peggy, lovely lady, she predeceased him, he was never the same after that. Peggy was a sister to Mary, I don't know their maiden name, I'm grasping. She was married to Ron Beatty. Yeah, Mary, Peggy and Mary were sisters. Anyway, where was I going with that? The Chantlers, yeah, Keith came back into my life in later days because he needed something to do, so he'd go down to the Holland Marsh and buy bags and truckloads of carrots and deliver them to all the horse farms, so we'd feed our horses carrots.
So, Marv, do you have any stories of the hall? Any
Yeah,
memories?
but I can't tell them. I'm looking. Yeah, the hall, I remember getting called out big time one night. My mom and dad would come up on Friday nights, they'd play progressive euchre. And I wasn't very old. And it was an honest mistake, but I got called for reneging. And boy, we'd go downstairs and have sandwiches and I'd get called out down there too. I noticed that, I didn't play suit when I was supposed to or something, I can't remember. Yeah, we would come here for, my first wife and I were honored to be here when we got married. In Chivalry or whatever, no, we'd come here on nights for the Jebs.
Doug Jeb?
Doug Jeb.
I think Doug's in the back there.
Are you here, Doug?
How are you doing, Mark?
Hey, I'm good. How are you? You're not out planting corn?
Oh, yeah, you sound good.
He's quite a guy, that Doug. And Joan, yeah. And Joan, they played here for many, many years.
That's right.
Yeah. Doug, how old are you? 90?
Yeah. 6.
6.
Oh,
And Doug, I've got a few get out of free church cards, so I haven't been lately. But Doug has been playing the harmonica, the saxophone at the Bondhead United Church for a long time. Yeah.
He played the sax at our Christmas party
Did he?
last December.
Is that right? Yeah.
With Bonnie on,
Okay.
His home just looks the same as it ever did.
doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, a big shout out, a big shout out to Rob Keffer for what Rob was able to do for the hall, the institute, and keeping things in perspective. Yeah, big shout out to Rob for that.
Yeah.
All we got to get, Rob's not involved anymore, but somehow we've got to get somebody to do something with your grandfather's. The sign is there, and it's a disgrace, right? The same people own that as the people that bought across the road, a bunch of doctors from so yeah. When I worked for Alan, you guys probably know this, but when I worked for Alan Houghton years and years and years ago, Lloyd Coleman sold the farm, and so did Wally Holbert, to a German syndicate. And I'm trying to think of their name who managed it for them. They lived in the Houghton house.
Oh, Marianne.
Marianne. There's Marianne. Hi, Marianne. Haven't seen you forever. And still around. Good for you. And the Edney farm to the, I don't know who bought the Edney farm to the south. I ran into the daughter the other day. I guess I'm getting old because I sure didn't recognize her. I mean, the last time I saw Jean, she was about like that. She's a grown woman with 4 children now. But, yeah, I think the purpose was with both farms, the Coburn farm and Wally's farm, was to build on. And the last time, maybe, Marion, you can tell me, the last time I heard, somebody told them to come back in 30 years that this property wasn't going to be developed. Is that factual?
I don't know.
Okay. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Any other questions? Is that?
I'm going
Lordy.
to thank you on behalf of the, I'm going to talk on here, on behalf of the Bradford West Gwillimbury, oh, I'm blinded, Historical Society, and all of us who were so curious and thrilled to we've got so many people from the community and coming to hear you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We're very lucky to have you capture all of this first-hand information for us. We feel very fortunate we could do that. Thank you so much for coming. We have on your behalf, we will be donating $100 to Matthew House on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. And
Thank
Mark,
you.
you want to finish up? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I have a few things.
Okay, well then we'll give you the next.
Recognize a lot of people, Barb, and who else is over here that I recognize? I can't see Mr. Jim back there.
He's in the back row there.
Yeah, no, I see him.
You know Bob Wood?
I know him. Where's your wife?
She's on holidays, not at home. So I thought
Hey, can you fix my lawnmower tomorrow? You still fixing lawnmowers?
that's
So that's a pretty definite no, I think, yeah. I thought we might have the banner post here tonight. We're going to Hank and Mary Lynn.
Yeah, I do.
This man has his hand.
we know well, but
Yeah, okay.
we know Hank and Mary Betty real well.
Yeah, good. And what's your last name?
Van Dyke.
Van Dyke.
Van Dyke, I went to school with the Van Dykes.
Are you Van Dyke's from Bradford?
No.
Oh,
That's the
Oh,
police, Andy Van Dyke, the policeman, no relation.
okay. But there were marsh, we call them marsh muckers down back in the Where are you from?
Schaumburg.
Schaumburg, okay.
Not to be, I have no immediate relatives in this area.
Okay. Yeah, well, Fran was telling about, if they had been here tonight, I think I would have brought up the story of Hank and Mr. Heffering, who in later days was a horseman. I raced horses for 58 years now. It's all about his grandfather's fault because I had a summer job at his grandfather's painting fences, and Mr. Rowe was...
my story too, that's
and I was painting fences, and Mr. Rowe, Ethel Hughes. Ethel had the little house on the far end of town, just as you start to go up the hill. She was your father's secretary. And Ethel came out and said, Mr. Rowe, you wanted on the phone Ottawa. So he says, here, take this horse. I said, what am I going to do with a horse? Threw me the lines and away I go. And I ended up getting my driver's license all because of getting involved with the Rowe family. Yeah, and then, of course, the Rowe family were very close to the Chantlers, even though we paid $500 for that lot. It was $500, holy lordy. Anyway, and my dad really got along with no, we don't say Tree, with Mrs. Rowe. She would never call anybody by her first name, by their first name, never. Be Mr. Chantler, Mr. Chantler. So finally he pleaded, because he'd go in for, Mr. Rowe he was always gone somewhere, and he'd go in and have tea with Mrs. Rowe in the morning after. He'd go down and jog a horse, because he got into, in his later life when he retired, he got a horse, and that's where I got my license. So anyway, he'd go in and have tea with Mrs. Rowe. I think he got her convinced to call him Mr. D, and he called her Mrs. Treva. She was a Lennox, yeah. And Earl Lennox would have been cousin. Earl Lennox had the store for quite some while. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Matthew says is very close and dear to my heart.
That's my notes.